I was asked the question of debt. Who do we owe our debt to? First of all, the debt comes from our creditors. Each country holds the debt of another country. It is in this sense that we should all self-repay. For example, China holds a huge part of the American debt. Similarly, America holds a huge part of the Chinese debt. So let's solve the problem by repaying each other. Or let's solve it by canceling the part owed by each witness, and only pay the surplus, that is to say the dividend. I understand that we made the mistake of placing high interest rates on our debts. This is to take advantage of the gifts and donations that we make. We do not give for nothing. But as is the case for all credits and debts, we expect the repayment of the balance from each. Given that these days most countries are in conflict, it is difficult to see a country being the first in its repayment. I thought I heard Nancy Pelosi pointing the finger at the issue. She said, our American debt, to whom do we owe it? In other words, even politicians don't know what to do with the debt. One solution would be to cancel our debts. How? By diplomatic means. By consulting each state. I understand that there are debts that are more enormous in terms of sum of money than others. And that is why there would be a form of injustice in canceling public debts in this way. The idea came to me because many thinkers have written about the reset and what it would represent. First of all, it would be a reset of the state's finances. And to start from scratch. That is to say, without debt, it takes a minimum of fortune. Understand that the state would be at zero, but not the private companies. Because the state profits come first and foremost from these private companies. In other words, it is the state's public companies that are impoverishing us, first and foremost at the threshold. Why is it like that? Because it is hard to assess the price of a teacher. So his salary. It is hard to assess the price of a civil servant. We base ourselves on tax revenues. So it is the ministers themselves who establish the ministerial salary and the civil servant salary. This is money taken from our citizens. In other words, civil servants do not produce money. They draw it from the source, that is to say from the private sector. The private sector creates real money, in particular because it comes from the sale of goods. There are also state-owned companies that create goods. This is the case for EDF in France and Hydro-Quebec in Canada. Both are energy companies, whether it is hydraulic or nuclear. They hire engineers. I will make a small digression here. Do you know why money bills are unlimited? Precisely because they are paper and we all have some. There are trees and forests all over the world. Therefore, all countries should be able to provide themselves with paper money. The production cost of paper is lower compared to the production costs of coins. In the slideshow, I put the anime, Reborn, as a vending machine, in which the main character as a vending machine eats coins in exchange for food and other goods. Only he does not give change. And the country ends up realizing that coins are disappearing and becoming rare. The solution comes after, by manufacturing paper notes which, like leaves and trees, are infinite. You can cut down a tree to build your house, your ticket office, and replant a tree for future seasons. It is a cyclical business that renews itself. And we do not lack trees anywhere in the world. Each country is more or less provided with trees. Even the Gulf countries, the Middle East, and the deserts. Period. I close my parenthesis. The indebted countries are, first of all, those that lack money. They lack it precisely because they finance other countries. They also finance their own project, but the cost of profitability depends on several factors. First, when we finance a project, it is supposed to give us back our budget and benefit us in the long term. Or at the end of the financing, there are projects that do not succeed, and others whose interest is lost. I have often said that I like One Piece, but just like any product that lasts and endures over time, it runs the risk of expiring. At least seeing my joy tire of it. In the case of One Piece, I got tired of it and I am only waiting for the conclusion of the story. Fortunately for the author, there are always new generations who come and revive showbiz. New fans. So the question of debt is, how do we get rid of it, or how do we avoid being in debt in the future? If we know where the debt comes from, it is possible to stop it. On the other hand, if we do not know where the debt comes from, it comes from a scam. In tune, does debt come from exports or imports? Each country has its qualities. But in answer to the question, exports are always better than imports. Because we export what we have too much of in our countries. And we import what we lack. It is always better to have than to receive. Hence the climatic, territorial and budgetary independence. Exports make our income while imports make our debts. What I import, I pay for. Whereas what I export, I sell. So the money comes from our exports and not from our imports. This is not always the case. Let's take the example of oil. Crude oil is worth less than refined oil, than gasoline. And generally speaking, a raw product is always worth less than its transformation. The same goes for food. Restaurants sell us the finished cuisine, but they buy their food from the grocer. At the grocer it is cheaper than at the restaurant. Finally, we can finance the debt of states in the same way that we finance credits. By reinvesting the money from the debt, others are ready to pay our debts if it contributes to their development. Just like people who take out credit cards. The benefit of the creditor in the case of credits is his returns and his repayment. More particularly the accumulated interest. In the case of state debts, the interest should be erased, because the interest accumulates from days to years. So these are factors that prevent and delay repayment. What is the point of giving credit if we cannot benefit from it? Precisely, this is used to repay the debt. Let's say you have a $10,000 credit card, and you take $5,000 from it to buy a used car. All you have to do is repay the $5,000 you took. The other $5,000 that went to the dealer will be reinjected. In other words, the dealer and you will each reinject $5,000 into the debt of the state that gave you the credit the first time, which makes $10,000 that the state collects for having lent you $5,000 in credit. Where the state will lose is in financing abroad, because as I said, it is exporting that allows us to amass money and not importing. It is selling and reselling that allows us to amass money and not buying. Apart from the purchase of raw materials. But that's all. In other words, it's the internal business that's healthy, not the international business. Of course, the international business allows us to boost the numbers. We're talking about trillions. But it's this same international business that puts us into debt. So we have to review our choices. Either the choice of an international government with its debts, or the choice of a national government without debt but probably without billionaires nonetheless.